Hello there and welcome to Talent and Growth Live, our first ever live webinar event with a roundtable panel. So thank you for joining us today. This is our first one, so please bear with us. I'm using StreamYard, which I've never used before. I'm doing LinkedIn Live. Never done this at all, so hopefully it will all go right. Either way, I'm sure we'll have a good conversation. And today I'm joined by three guests who are going to help talk through this topic, which is around what TA can do in a hiring freeze. And I'll talk a bit more about how we've come to that topic in a second. But can we just go around the virtual roundtable? So, Nuria, this was your idea, as I pointed out. So please, if you wouldn't mind giving a quick intro to yourself and what you do, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Nuria. I am Talent Acquisition Manager at Spacelift. It's a full remote Polish-American and tech startup. I've been working in recruitment for the past 8 years, mostly between London and Paris. And I have a mixed experience, both in agencies and in-house, mostly in-house, across different industries. However, my main focus for the past years has been within the tech scene, in e-commerce, fintech, SaaS startups, recruiting international talent and in corporate functions, a little bit in tech, and mostly in EMEA and US regions.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us today. And Parul, ever organised, putting me to shame. Great to have you here. Please give us a quick intro if you don't mind.
Thanks for having me, Paul. So thanks everyone for joining today. So I'm a Scouser based in Manchester. I spent 4 years in agency tech recruitment, and then I moved internal at a company called X Design. So we're a UK-based digital development partner with clients like Tesco Bank, Money Supermarket, FanDuel. So I did the TA role for roughly sort of like 8-9 months, and then I actually started a 3-month secondment in recruitment marketing, which I'm doing at the moment. So quite a sort of like varies past year. I was also late diagnosed ADHD, so I'm a neurodiversity advocate, both within X Design and also just externally on like my platforms as well. And obviously just got to give a shout out to the podcast that I did with you. So yeah, check out Paul's podcast that we did on like neurodiversity and recruitment. So really enjoyed that one. I'm also a board member at Manchester Tech Festival, organised like various like groups as well. And just wanted to preempt it. I'm still ill with that bug that's been going around. So I've got a bit of a cough, so I do apologise if I have to go and like hide away, like die in the corner for a second. But fingers crossed I'll be fine. And thanks for having me.
No problem, and we will excuse you if you do need to go and have a cough. That's absolutely fine. And Paul, a little bit last minute for you, and I'm sure last Friday when I turned up late to my own meeting, which I booked you, thinking, what the hell have I signed up for? So I appreciate your patience in getting involved, but quick intro for everyone listening, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries, Paul, and thanks for having me. And yeah, I don't mind a bit of last minute. All good. So I'm Paul Abercrombie. I'm a talent acquisition director at a company called Klaviyo. We're a marketing automation software company based out of the US, but quite a significant presence here in EMEA and down in APAC as well. So I've been with the company close to 1.5 years now. Previous to that, I was at Bazaar Voice, another marketing technology software company. I was there for 12 years, believe it or not, running through every role within recruitment, ended up heading up the global team there. Previous to that, I was in agency as well. Previous to that, I did recruiting in the civil service. So I've got sort of 20 years plus in recruiting. And like Parul, I did a podcast with Paul last year, and very grateful to be invited to take part today. Thank you again, Paul.
Pleasure. Thank you all. So yeah, an all-star panel, of course. Yeah, so let's talk about the topic. So what can TA do in a hiring freeze? So for me, one of the worst parts of last year was seeing on LinkedIn, it seemed every week, how many great people are getting laid off. And typically, very often these people were in TA, and we saw something similar in 2020, of course, which were different circumstances. But I think the reality is the life we chose in TA is it is a high risk job, because when the tough times come, and they do come, they always do, they always go in cycles. We can sometimes be some of the first ones to be let go from a business. Now, I think there's lots of reasons for this. If we put aside the fact that sometimes companies just need to let people go, that happens. It's an inevitability. I think sometimes businesses don't realise how special and talented their TA people are, and what their backgrounds are, what they've done before, be it in sales, marketing, or what their potentials are. Because there's some great people in TA. So I think for me, this conversation is around two things. It's around, firstly, if you're working in TA, what can you do to put your hand up in a tactful way and get involved in more areas of the business? What could they be? How do you do it? How do you make that work with, you know, all your other 100 things you've got to do in your day-to-day job? And then also maybe that will also coincide with some advice for businesses who aren't really sure what to do with their TA people, don't understand what the TA people other than just get CVs. And maybe if we have all of that information, maybe we'll help a few people next time those tough times come around. So the first, I suppose, question, and it's a bit loaded, but we'll start with it. Paul, do you think that sometimes the businesses don't really realise what TA people actually do? Is that something you feel sometimes?
Yeah, I do see that a lot. I think TA can be looked at as more of a delivery function, very focused on an end result. However, we all know, and I suspect all of the folks here joining us would argue that they can do a lot more than that. I think if you boil down some of the fundamentals of a TA function, that stakeholder partnership is a key piece of that. The TA team and the business need to work hand in hand to achieve results, both in terms of recruiting and perhaps when things have slowed down. And I think fundamentally, if you have that strong relationship with your stakeholders, all of those other skills and those other possibilities should come out during those relationships, and hopefully the business will have some insight into what we can offer above and beyond the delivery piece that I already mentioned there.
Absolutely. Nuria, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think for my previous experience, whether like they used to work a lot with agencies, when there's a new internal team going in, you have to put yourself out there. You have to brand yourself as a, like your new partner. I had many times hiring managers telling me like, like you're being too pushy, like you want to hire because you're going to get a commission. I'm like, I'm not an agency, I get paid at the end of the day, whether you recruit or not. But, it's my role as a partner of yours to make good hiring with you and help your team grow and make you achieve your goals at the end of all our goals. So I think it's like whether they don't want to sometimes write job descriptions or make themselves available for interviewing, it's our role just to define those boundaries. And I always describe this partnership as a tennis match. So whether like you give me something, I gave you something, and like between the two of us, we're gonna make this hiring. So but it's up to us also to define that and just to let them know what we do, what we can offer, and what they have to do too.
Fantastic, thank you. And I should just add to the audience, I should have said this at the beginning, if you have any questions throughout this, please do pop it in the comments, and if it's a good question, only if it's a good question, I will ask our panel. Parul, over to you. How do we ensure we maintain visibility around our activity outside of simply sourcing CVs?
I think it's a really tricky thing to achieve. I think it's that sort of like effect is compounded if you are working predominantly remote. If you're in an office, you see what TA are doing, you see them doing all the interviews and everything. You don't really get that like working from home. One of the things that X Design do like really well, and this is for multiple departments across the business, we have a monthly company update or like a company all hands, and like various departments will sort of like showcase, talk about any like new exciting like changes, any new developments, any like key achievements. So I was always so proud to see like the TA team talking about our number of like hires, what roles we've like hired for, how many that we've all directly like sourced ourselves, because we relied very little on like agencies as well. So a company all hands is a really good way to actually like showcase that visibility and the impacts that people are also making. So that would be sort of like my kind of like insight. So Nuria, I don't know if like you would have anything to add to that.
Yep, definitely. So, for example, what I've been doing now, it's been delivering some trainings, especially that's a classic training I've been doing across different business. It's like the interview training. Usually I do like volume 1 and volume 2 of like more level of expertise. So that also helps, build this partnership, and also not only with hiring managers, but for the people, for the business itself. And and initiatives like that also like help us build our brand. And then there's so much also partnering on the employer branding side with the marketing teams, just to help us build all of that for the future. So in terms of like just like sourcing CVs, I think like it's, as you said, on these all hands, there's usually at the end, you know, like the top of the iceberg that we see, oh, we hired this many people. But it's funny when, you know, like when sometimes you struggle and you present like a small short list and the hiring manager goes like, well, there was only some 3 people. Like, yeah, but I've seen, I don't know, like 20, 25, 50. So I think it's important also for to let hiring managers know when actually you're meeting people, but they're not working out. Or I like to make a feedback, the negative feedback, just to showcase also all the hard work I go through just to present a 3 people shortlist.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, some great insights there. And I think the use of data is so important, isn't it? I mean, just keeping visibility around the data and sharing that with the key stakeholders in the business is really, really important. With the next question I want to ask, so which is, what are some of the other crucial areas of TA that they could be working when there's a hiring freeze and there's no CV sourcing necessary? I think for me, the key thing with this is, we can't wait until there's a hiring freeze to start doing this. If we get to a hiring freeze and, you know, everything stops and you put your hand up and say, oh no, I can do this, that's not going to work so well. So I think that it's really key that we're looking at this early on. So just Paul, if I go to you on this, what are some of the other crucial areas of TA that we could be working on and doing when there's a hiring freeze and CV sourcing isn't number one priority?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's plenty of things to do. And to your point there, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that arguably all these sort of things that we're going to talk about here, we should be doing all of the time, you know, depending on the level of roles that we're working on, will sort of vary in the amount we can focus on them perhaps. But without wanting to steal Parul's thunder too much here, I think helping to develop the employer brand is very, very important in this time. So hopefully we're all taking quite a long-term view to our time in our current company. So what does that look like for the year ahead? Like, how do we engage with the audience on our brand and make it attractive and exciting and interesting? We have a calendar of content here across the year, some of it tied to specific things that are going on in the world, but some of it tied to business trends and also things that are going on here at Klaviyo within our company. Topical engagement off the back of that is really good for LinkedIn and other platforms, as we all know. I'd encourage people as they look at this as well also to future-proof their ideas. We all want to be creative and dynamic in the moment to stuff that's going on, but if you create things that are repeatable and scalable, this will greatly help you when it becomes busy on the candidate side again. So yes, running something very detailed and creative is a lot of fun, but maybe that just becomes a one-off. But actually, how can you create things that, as I said, are repeatable and scalable over time? So that would be one point. So some other points I can lean into, but perhaps I'll pass over to Nuria or Parul to share some more.
Yeah, before getting to this point, I think the pipelining, I think that's something that is always something that we aim to do. But at the end of the day, when we are very busy hiring, we're in survival mode. So priorities are getting offers, scheduling interviews, screening as many candidates, sourcing. So then when we can like sort of like heads up that the hiring freeze is coming in, pipelining, competitors analysis, market mapping. There's so much, we gather so much knowledge by talking to so many candidates from different areas in different industries. So documenting all of that and just cleaning that data and just like make it knowledgeable for future hiring. We can easily identify when it's been like bottlenecks. So analyzing our process, what worked, what didn't work, especially when we are doing, for example, home assignments. So yeah, just taking a step back and analyzing like just taking like the bigger picture of what is working and not, and then just keep improving our process, because that's just an ongoing work to do all the time. And sometimes we just don't take the time. Something silly also as like learning how to utilize properly our ATS, because sometimes there's so many functionalities that we end up doing manually because we don't want to take the time. And then you can set up so many automated actions that then they will save us so much time in the future.
Fantastic. Parul?
Yeah. Love all of those. Paul, I really like to point on like future-proofing the ideas. I think I'm definitely guilty of like jumping to like, oh, new like shiny thing or like automation tool, but like how scalable actually is it? So yeah, that's like really good. So I guess just to preface it is like we're like Susanna, we're not in a hiring freeze, and we've like been hiring quite quick, and we've scaled I think from like 100 odds since this time last year to like 350 people. But while I was in like the TA role, is I was trying to like do quite a lot of these things while I was still like recruiting. So depending on what company like you're in, like you may have like quiet periods or not. We didn't really, but being able to actually like do that, you know, in the case if we ever got to that point, it means that you already know what you can contribute to. There was a phrase that my like line manager used, which I thought was really good, which is like work on it instead of in it. So if you're not working in the TA role, actively recruiting is work on improving it. So doing things like pipeline like analysis. One of the things that I did was conducting like interviewer forums. So I was mostly recruiting for the front end department, and there were a lot of like interviewers that were like regular interviewers and really active. So I did a forum like every 3 weeks, and we'd have like an agenda. We'd get people to put their discussion points if they have any pain points, and my goal there was to identify any kinds of like blockers, any ways that we can make the process like more efficient and actually like take an action on it. So this is definitely something that you know, TA people can do, you know, before that point, but also at times when, you know, sourcing isn't like really necessary. One of the things that I've been doing after moving to the recruitment marketing role is a project around candidate personas. So we recruit in tech. Tech is a very, very diverse industry, and sometimes there can be assumptions that like a candidate is a certain like profile or persona and they want this thing. On doing this like project, I've basically conducted like interviews with people that have started in the last 6 months, getting to understand their like mindset, their approach to like, okay, I'm looking, what were they looking for? What kind of platforms did they use? What attracted them to adverts? What didn't they see that they would like to see like more of? And starting to shape those. And there's actually a lot of like research that has come out off the back of that. And, you know, if you're not in a hiring freeze, I would still say like definitely start to do those sorts of things. Obviously it might be, you know, not as like extensive. And then also stuff like job adverts, which the candidate personas can actually like feed into, and also stuff like salary and benefits benchmarking as well. Because I don't know about some of the roles that Nuria and Paul like recruit for. Tech candidates, a lot of them want, you know, the best salaries, the best benefits. It's changing like a lot of the time. So this is something that the TA team do on like a quarterly like basis. I think sometimes benefits gets like forgotten like quite a bit. So if like you're recruiting in a competitive market, you offering something that like other people don't have, it can like put you ahead a little bit. So yeah, there's a lot of probably like add there. But yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Paul.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I think, yes, I mean, just to pick up on some things you mentioned there. So in terms of the what candidates want piece, you know, I'm presenting quite a lot of data around this to my clients. And the headline is they want everything. They want money, they want benefits, they want flexibility, they want remote working, so they want a lot. The other key point you made, I think, there for me was the you need to work on a business, not just in it. You know, as a new business owner, I'm really feeling that because you're in the thick of it every day. And certainly in recruitment and TA, you can do the same thing. And when I was managing agency teams, one thing I tried to stress was the 50-30-20 rule, which was spend 50% on the short term, 30% on the medium term, 20% of your long term of your time, because you need to be thinking beyond just today. And that's really, really key in agency life, you know, with your business development or whatever, but certainly it's key for TA as well. I'm just going to jump to we've got some questions and some comments, and being a tech savvy professional, I know that if I click on one of these, it'll put them on the screen. I'm joking. Parul told me how to do this. So, Nuria, the question is for you, this first one. So if you can see that, so how are you training the team around interviews, and what areas of the interview process are you focused on? That's from Glenn Ratcliffe. Glenn, thank you very much.
Yes, so I mean, I just delivered this training like a few weeks ago for Spacelift, but I had the chance to like reproduce it and improve it, and also depending on on what the looking the team. So I usually do like the basic package that I call it, which is interview training, which is actually, you know, like hiring managers sometimes they're used to it, but because I've been working in startups where like some quite like young folks get like promoted very easily, and then you actually become the candidate and very quickly start like managing a team. So just like the basics, you know, like forbidden questions, you know, like what is like what not to ask, how to present yourself. The whole interview scene also has changed from like face to face, which like we all had the feeling that it was easier to spot some red flags, to like just video interviewing like I'm doing right now. So going through like the basics of behavioral questions, how the STAR system works. So giving the tools to the hiring managers on how to make the most of the time that they're spending with this candidate to avoid having to meet them or like having to introduce a lot of people from the business, and also like a splitting, just making the most of each interviewer. So like the candidate doesn't have to explain the same over and over. So that's one. And then, for instance, also I deliver quite a lot of like ATS training, because for us, it's a key data programming. So it's very important that feedback is correct, that we can actually deliver. And then if I am not in the picture because I'm on holidays or something happens to me, anyone in the team can pick it up. So the ATS is key for everyone to like put their information in there. So that's also like something that I understand that for us, TA or HR, we're used to use our tools. But then when we start bombarding hiring managers and they have Salesforce and Canva and all of the tools that they have to use every day, plus our ATS, most of the time they're like, huh, another tool, I just don't like going there. I'd just rather go to Slack or email you. So it's, you know, like just giving them the tools and making life easier for them.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm just going to share some of the other comments on the screen. These aren't actually questions, but some of the comments. And speakers, if this triggers anything that you'd like to talk about or mention, just please just put your hand up or shout, whatever you want to do. Darren Weeks said, really good points. TA is more than just sourcing, but is often seen as just that. TA has a much wider benefit and ability to contribute across areas like employer brands, social media content and strategy, as it's what we do every day in our jobs. I absolutely agree. Mark Roster Smith, on the training aspect, Nuria just mentioned, we rolled out not just interview training part 1 and 2, but unconscious bias training programs and DEI training programs as well. Absolutely good use of the time, 100%. And then Scott Key said, similarly as a firm, we rolled out unconscious bias training combined with interview training. So cool, some good comments there. Thanks for putting those on.
Sorry,
go on.
could I just jump in quickly? I just want to piggyback on the back of what Nuria was saying. We also developed a similar process of interview training here. We kind of went down 2 routes, where we would have interviewer training, whereby we would talk to people that are members of a panel. So, you know, when you come in and you meet 3 or 4 different people, that would be sort of candidate experience and being conscious of unconscious bias and, you know, what questions to ask and not to ask. But then we also developed a hiring manager training, which in truth was a lot more detailed, where we would really sort of drill down on some of the key areas that hiring managers need to think about and what they need to partner with the TA teams on as well. One of these in particular is actually looking at the process and thinking about the career architecture that we have in place. So we're lucky enough here at Klaviyo to have a career architecture, i.e., if you are a project manager or a marketing person, this is kind of the expectations of you in your role. And then we're able to marry that up with our process to make sure that we're evaluating candidates on those skills and those competencies. And similarly, take it right back to the job spec itself. Is the job spec an accurate representation of the job? And so I can feel pretty good in looking at our processes and knowing that you see consistency from one step to the other. But getting hiring managers on board with that and sort of understanding that is a little bit more intricate and a little bit more complicated. And so, as I said, by developing that second hiring manager training, it enabled us to go to a level of detail perhaps we wouldn't have gone to at a time where there's hundreds of recs on and everyone's going crazy on the delivery side.
Yeah, I also wanted to add to that as well. I don't know if it's like embedded within your like interviewer training as well, but I think that like feedback training is also like really important. So we currently use like Greenhouse as an ATS, and we've got it set up in like a fairly like standardized way for like the scorecards. So some people might be really, really good at like interviewing, but sometimes they might not necessarily know how to put that in words. So for example, if you've got to go back and reject a candidate, you need to have sufficient feedback in the first instance. You don't want to have to go back to somebody and say, right, can we catch up? I need you to clarify on this. I need to explain to them why I've rejected them. Or when you're using it to actually like make a decision as well. So that will tie into being able to give the right feedback, but then also how you set up like your competency areas on like the scorecards as well. Because one of the things that I'm like really passionate about is like that unconscious bias like aspect, and there's a lot of different types of like interviewer like bias, affinity bias being one of them. So people who are like us, I can sometimes get into the habit of thinking, oh, they're like dead chatty, like dead nice, like lovely, but you've got to come back and like ground yourself and think, do they fit like the key areas? So setting up like the scorecards in the right way to eliminate any kind of like personality like feedback or people just making a decision based on a gut feeling, basically just forcing the interviewers to basically give evidence of how they meet a criteria or like they don't. So yeah, just wanted to have that in.
Yes, it's a great point, and we could do a whole episode on that, couldn't we? Because I think the case of, your affinity bias is such a big deal and it's such a big thing. So we naturally gravitate towards people who we build rapport with and think are similar to ourselves. And that's why we need those matrices, and we always need to try and interview the person against the job and not against other candidates, as they say. And that's the key to trying to be as inclusive as possible, I think. Okay, so let's move on slightly. So, let's talk about what our experiences have been, maybe personally, or what we've seen of TA diversifying into other areas of the business. And I think, look, Parul, you're an obvious one because of the secondment you're doing right now. Do you want to talk a bit about how that came about and what you're doing, if you don't mind?
Yeah, of course. So they basically said, we'd like to offer you it as a 3 month secondment. And you know what? I just immediately knew it was going to be the best thing to do, because no matter what happens at the end of it, I've gained 3 months of really, really good experience, because I'm not hands-on recruiting. And I think we all agreed that you can neglect some of the other stuff where you just like CVs, interviews, etc. So some of the things that I've been like focusing around the candidate personas I already mentioned, and doing a big project around like our like job adverts, and I've been doing like focus groups with people in the business who are in those roles. So for example, did a focus group last week with 6 of our front end engineers, various like backgrounds and like levels, breaking down like the advert, getting to understand like what attracts them. And there were some things which I thought were important as a recruiter, which devs don't necessarily actually care that much about, and your job advert shouldn't really be that long. Another part of my role is also like community engagement as well. As a digital development partner, obviously we work with sort of like clients as well. So it's not just for hiring, but it's also for the business development aspect too. So one of the things that I brought in as well is like partnerships with like various like communities. So there's some like conferences, which it's in the process, we can't like announce it. And then there's another community which I'd like to shout out called the Coder Career, who support early career devs with either getting into jobs or in like sort of the first couple of years. And we ran an event in our like office as well. So what's been really nice is that this is the first role of its kind, and I really appreciate like the opportunity to pretty much like shape something new. So if you do get a chance to do a secondment in something like a little bit different, I would definitely like recommend it, because I think the idea of maybe taking like a full-time move out of recruitment, I'm a creature of habit, it's all I know, and I was quite scared. So the kind of like risk-free element of my job is still there if I want to go back into it. Was definitely like really, really nice. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing in a nutshell.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Nuria, is there anything you've seen or experienced yourself that we haven't talked about in terms of experiences of people kind of moving into other areas?
Yes, I mean, my experience particular has been maybe, especially when I was in the fintech companies, where I maybe lean towards more the HR aspects. As I can remember a time, especially at Lemon Way, which is a French startup. So I was the only one TA team. Then, I mean, we recruited someone junior, but then like the HR team was very small. So when I had maybe like few weeks or a couple of weeks, like more slowing things down, or like sort of like everything going well, I will like step in with my colleagues in HR to help them with contract renewals, especially at the beginning of the year when there's promotions and all the salary changes, and especially we were 100 people in the business and only like 2 or 3 of us in HR, so there was so much to do manually. So I've been like, for me, like it was easier to go back to like more HR and learn about other HR functions. Back then also I was in charge of onboarding, that then, like was takeover from me, but I was designing onboarding, delivering onboarding, even just doing some IT and programming, like for all the newcomers every Monday, programming their laptops and stuff like that. So when you're in startup, you just have to do it. There's not enough people so the lines are very blurred. And then also after COVID, also the last fintech I worked in the UK, so the same. So because we were not recruiting new people, but unfortunately we had to downsize the business. So I was collaborating and doing like a recruitment process, but internally. So like going to visit teams, and there were like 5-6 people, and then we had to reduce them down to like half, for example. So creating internal process that just to ensure that we're like keeping the best of our talent. So yeah, I haven't done like official secondment. It was more like done in a natural way, because in startups it's sort of like you lean towards like whether like help is needed.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you so much, Paul. So we've got all these ideas of what other areas we can do and areas we can go into. How do we do that while still maintaining what we're been brought in to do, which is of course getting our high performance in terms of the sourcing side of things? How do we do that?
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, I'd like to sort of repeat some of the points we made earlier, and I'd argue that everything we're talking about here is part of the TA function in 2023, depending on the live, the number of live roles and things like that going. So I don't think we should be saying that TA will start to look at these areas in a slowdown. I think it should be part and parcel of what we're doing. But obviously, if there is a slowdown, then it does give us greater opportunity to dive in and focus on those particular projects that we'd all like more time to do. So maintaining the sourcing alongside that, though, still needs to be a big focus for us, because ultimately it is a core part of our responsibility and the ultimate delivery of what we can do. I think to the point I made earlier on repeatable and scalable things, there are ways that you can set up sourcing to enable you to have a constant flow of communications with candidates. The good recruiters are the ones, we talked about silver medal candidates in the comments earlier, the recruiters that actually do get back to people. When you say to someone, "Oh, we'll let you know if something comes up," I genuinely mean that when I say it to people, and I have a system whereby I can get back to people, and I'll encourage hiring managers and my team to make sure that they do that as well. So that would be one way, sort of keeping that pipeline going.
Yeah, absolutely. And Parul, anything to add to that at all?
So actually, I totally agree with what Paul says. I don't think we should completely automate and take away the human element of recruitment, but there's definitely some ways that can do it to ease up some of the time. I think, is it Parkinson's law? Is that the one? Yes, it is. I always get them mixed up. So where it's work will fill the time that you allocate to it. So if you say, I'm going to spend 5 hours today sourcing and recruiting for these roles, you're going to get the same output in 5 hours than sometimes in 2 to 3 hours. So I think it's just a mindset shift, is that, oh, I'm not losing 2 hours a day because I'm doing community engagement stuff. Because what I found is, so actually before I did my secondment formally, I was actually doing 4 hours of community engagement actually a week. In that period, my output didn't drop, I still hired the same number of candidates. The pipelines were still like absolutely the same. I wasn't working more hours like during the week. So I think if you think, oh, well, I'm losing like time because I'm not spending it on like sourcing, the quality can like sometimes like drop. So I think it's a lot of the time working smarter, not harder.
As they say, easy said than done, but absolutely. And of course, look, I think if you're working in TA, the opportunities that arise for you or that you can make happen will differ depending on the size and type of business you're in, you know. So if we look at bigger businesses, first of all, Parul, what do you think in terms of the opportunities and challenges around for TA people looking to branch out and how they should go about it?
Yeah, so I think me and Nuria obviously have some kind of like opposite like experiences, which is really good because I've only worked in internal in a large business, but she said that she didn't do like a formal like secondment, but got to do like a lot of the stuff. So I guess in like my experience, because obviously we have like marketing people, so it is a lot easier for me to do like a formal secondment in like a completely like different team, and then the TA team are also being able to like plug that like gap as well for me, like not being there for like 3 months. So I think that's definitely one of the ways that like bigger businesses can like do it as well. But some people may see that as a sort of like negative because they may want it to be like a part of their job. So I think Nuria, you might have something good to add there about sort of like the flip side in like a smaller business.
Well, yeah, I think in a smaller business, as I mentioned before, like the lines are very blurred. So if someone needs some, you just have to go and do it, and you go and support. And communication usually it goes faster because you are very much in touch with the teams all the time. So you know what is going on, and especially I think we have in TA so many transferable skills. So when like in sales or marketing or operations, someone is needed, then you can easily like go and jump into like project management. However, I will say like the challenge on that is that a small business also don't usually have a lot of time. They cannot afford just to have someone not doing their job and just like laying around and just doing other stuff, because they're usually like one person does this. So unfortunately, they need to focus on this because this brings X amount of revenue. So I will say for startups, usually there's not the time is not there, and you cannot just allow yourself like, oh, I'm just gonna go somewhere else. And if you disappear from your job function for 3 months, there's no one else to replace you. So you usually take on with you on top of that. So maybe you have less of this, but then you're doing 2 or 3 jobs at the time.
Yeah, makes sense. Paul, anything to add on that?
Yeah, just similar comments really on what everything we've talked about here. I think from my experience, probably leaning on smaller businesses. I think the TA team have a fantastic opportunity to really showcase themselves as a bit of everything. A strong TA person needs to be a good project manager, a good salesperson, a good data analyst. They also need to be, and I feel this is an exciting area that we've all grown into, the brand piece. Again, to repeat some of the bits I said earlier, like the ability to sort of lean into that employer brand and influence and shape that. It's key. It's a key fundamental that will ultimately help drive your pipeline and your funnel and all that sort of stuff as well. So the breadth at which TA are working is a lot wider, particularly in those smaller companies.
And do we think that if we're how do we tactfully do this? So how do we make sure that we're not I suppose overstepping our mark in terms of other areas, or trying to, maybe it could be seen to getting outside of the crux of our role? Parul, what do you feel? Or Paul, if you've got something to...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, yeah. I'm lucky enough in my current company to be able to partner with folks that are focused in this particular area. But in previous areas I've worked in the past, we haven't had that luxury to have that sort of in-house team and system. And so it is a conversation with marketing, and it is about sort of explaining the value add that TA can bring. Marketing, 90% of the time, I focus on driving sales into the organization. And so employer brand and talent acquisition off the back of that isn't going to be in their top 5 priorities for a certain year, but it will be in the top 3 for me. And so you have to sort of step into that relationship with marketing and build that partnership, which sometimes throws you out of the comfort zone a little bit, because you are stepping into someone else's patch, so to speak. But if you do it well, it will create value for both sides. We actually often see better engagement of people recruiting focused content out there than perhaps some of the corporate stuff as well. But I think when that starts to happen, marketing are like, oh wow, this is actually quite impactful. Parul, over to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's like really interesting, because obviously we do have like separate like teams for it, and there was like not as much as like an overlap. So it's interesting to see how you kind of like did it. And I think one of the things in terms of like building relationships with stakeholders and like people across like the business. So I know like people talk a lot about you want to keep building like your skills, add more like those strings to your bow, bows to your string. But I actually think that if you build really good relationships, your relationships that you have with people in the business are so much harder to replace. And sort of as abrupt as like it sounds, is like ultimately like everybody is replaceable. So some of the things that I've kind of like started to get myself involved in is I basically put myself forward as our neurodiversity advocate. It's something that we've never actually like had before. I said it's something that I'm really, really passionate about. I don't know what it's going to look like. So our people team are some of our like key stakeholders. So I've worked really, really closely with them on shaping this like advocacy role. So that's been getting involved in like new like policies that are like neurodivergent like friendly, working on actually like formalizing like the role, starting to create like a community as well. I've done like internal sessions on like neurodiversity at work, and this isn't the only thing that you can do with that. We can basically use this as like a blueprint and like replicate it for other kind of like advocate like roles. So I think people forget like the people team and the HR team sometimes, but I think there's such a crucial function of like the business. And then if like your company has like other like employee like resource groups, like we've got like a STEM community as well, which I've been putting off like getting involved in, because I was like, oh, I'm like dead busy. But again, that's something which is not as a part of a TA or like a marketing role, like for example, but it's another way that I can like partially like embed myself in like other areas of like the business without kind of like formally like doing those roles. So I don't know if like any of you have like done anything like similar to that.
No,
okay. No, good. No, thank you, Phil. Okay, so if we reverse engineer a little bit, then, so we start putting ourselves in the business's shoes and start saying, okay, how can businesses start setting their TA people up for success and giving them those opportunities? Paul, what do you think?
So yeah, I think going right back to the start of the call, the traditional view of a TA team can sometimes be too narrow. So all about delivery and end product. But I'd encourage all businesses to realize that you have a fantastic resource in your in-house TA team that can touch on many things. Ultimately, that TA team, by bringing in the right talent and putting in all of the structures to ensure that you get the right talent and it's done in a diverse and equitable way, it's helping shape the future success of the entire company. Your TA team is the window to the market, right? And that team's ability to partner with you well is so crucial. So many business podcasts out there and speakers, but fundamentally you see a lot of commonality in hiring and the challenges in hiring and the partnerships that someone needs to build with their TA team. It's just so crucial, and I would just encourage any businesses out there to have that mindset as they look at how they're going to partner with their TA team.
I think as well, just to add to that, I think it's important. It's easier said than done, because of course it gets scary sometimes when the tough times come. But we know everything goes in cycles, and what we obviously saw in 2020, we saw a great deal of people let go, And then what do we see when the hiring freeze, hiring started again? It's impossible to get TA people. Everyone wanted them because they'd let people go. A lot of people have left the industry. So with a bit of kind of more forward thinking, what can I do with these people just while they're on a hiring freeze? It might mean I don't have to pay X amount or spend thousands of pounds on a recruitment agency later on down the line because I've let my TA people go. Nuria, what did you think?
Yes, I think the TA team, as Paul said, we're ambassadors. We are salesperson. We're the first contact candidates. Candidates sometimes are clients too at the same time, so we have to be very careful with that. We usually feel very passionate, especially all of us. I think mostly that we work in-house recruitment teams because we have to believe, we're asking someone to like quit their job, which are like they can be happy or not, but then just come and join a business. They didn't know much about it. So it's crucial that then, just as the slightly side of problems or trouble, you just get rid of like your ambassadors, because then also I've seen it. Like I had a very experience that me being laid off, and then I've seen candidates that were like in interview process with me, seeing what that happened to their recruiter. They didn't end up joining the business because they're like, that just didn't give me like very good vibes of what was going on inside. I think like all of these, we've been mentioning all of these transferable skills that we have, data, project management, coordination, all the product knowledge that we have, because most of us are able, especially tech recruiters, are able to like talk very passionate about like all the nuances about the product and the business. You're just like giving away that knowledge, and then usually it's not even that long, that cycle. You're like desperate looking for TA, and then I hear they're like, oh, but you asked for so much money. It's like, well, yeah, like I have to change jobs very easily because like especially in startup, like the cycle goes, it doesn't last more than 2 years. So then like the business gets sold or like reacquired by someone else, and then the whole structure changes. So as every other function of the business, all of that knowledge, you don't want to let it go. So if you can try to keep it and like redirect that energy in somewhere else's department, I think that's the best you can do, and try to keep like the storm until sunnier times come. And then you have that team, and they can actually be either better ambassadors because they've survived this. You took care of them, and then they're going to be there like ready to go and ready to hire.
Love it. Thank you so much. And got one more question to ask a couple of you, and just to the audience, if you do have any further questions, then now's the time to put them in the box, and I can ask them after I ask my last question. Paul, you kind of you summed it up quite nicely earlier on, and what you have done a few times in terms of what the breadth of what we have to do in TA, with the project management, data analysis, sourcing, whatever. How do you see the role of TA evolving as we go into this, whatever's ahead of us in 2023? What's your thoughts and predictions?
I predict a pretty similar path to what I sort of outlined earlier, that we'll continue to have to lean further into things like the brand, the data, diversity, equity, inclusion, and the importance of that in the businesses. I hope that by leveraging various technologies around automation and sourcing and other things, there are tools out there that perhaps will make some areas of our work more efficient, both in the data and brand and other pieces and the core fundamentals of the role. But I fully believe that TA, talent acquisition partner, call it what you like, recruiter, 3 years from now, that job spec will really be very wide and all-encompassing in terms of the requirements there.
Thanks, Paul. Nuria, crystal ball, what do you think?
For me, I think Parul, and I heard some hits about it. I think for me, I always seen it. So TA is usually like a sort of like a element that is in there, and it's like, oh, you're HR. But I feel very detached sometimes from the HR teams. So how I see for me, and I've seen it in some business that can actually afford this, but it's just like actually being embedded with the business units. When you can afford, I've seen, especially that happens a lot in tech, they become part of the squad itself. So for me, being actually being put with the business more than rather than reattached with HR. That's how I see the TA function moving on, because you become an expert in your field. So, like building this network, having all of this candidate network around you, so then you can easily spot and know who will be perfect for that. All the competitors analysis that we do, all the market mapping that we do, then just bringing all of that knowledge and just being embedded with the business units. That's how I see TA moving forward.
Love it. Thank you very much. Well, I think that brings us to a nice close. Parul, if anybody wants to reach out to you after this and get your ideas or thoughts on anything, what's the best way for them to do so?
So my LinkedIn or my Twitter, which I think is like within the LinkedIn, will be the best way to reach out.
Fantastic. Paul, same to you.
Yeah, same to me. Find me on LinkedIn. I'd be lying if I said I had an established Twitter following, but you're welcome to track me down on there as well if you want. But LinkedIn's definitely the best place.
You're not big on TikTok?
I'm not a TikToker as it stands. It's on my to-do list. Everything I'm talking about here with brands, like we need to get there.
It's on mine as well, I know. And Nuria, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
LinkedIn. I have to say I'm not picky. I accept almost anyone. So I give advice. I talk to many professionals. I help develop people like that, develop a new sourcing tool. So I like to be in touch with the community and know what is going on. I've been giving free advice to many candidate CV reviews for free. I like to contribute in that way. So LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to me.
Appreciate that. And I appreciate all three of you. Appreciate everyone listening today. This will be going out on our Thursday Talent and Growth podcast, but we'll be back in next week at midday. We're going to be talking about how to use the right data for your TA team. So do come back and listen to that. But speakers, thank you so much. And everyone, I'll see you on the other side.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.